My husband stole $50K to take his mistress to Europe, but the card he chose was connected to federal alerts, and now he's doing community service while I'm living my best life. I'm 34 years old. I work in cybersecurity, and what I'm about to tell you sounds so ridiculous that if I hadn't lived it myself, I wouldn't believe it. But it turns out my ex-husband literally stole my credit card information to go on a vacation to Europe with another woman. And the craziest part of all this is that the idiot didn't know the card he stole was part of a fraud detection training program at my work. I mean, of all the cards he could have chosen, he picked the only one that was directly connected to federal alerts. I can't make this shit up. I guess I should start from the beginning so it all makes sense. I met Vincent like 6 years ago, when I was 28 and had just gotten my current job at a pretty big cybersecurity firm. He was working in marketing at the time, or so he said. Because looking back, I think he was already exaggerating his achievements back then. He was charming, you know. One of those guys who knows exactly what to say and when to say it, and I was at that point in my life where I thought it was time to settle down, and all those things society tells you should do. We got married 2 years later, in a small ceremony because I didn't want anything elaborate and he agreed. Though now I wonder if it was because he really didn't have money to contribute to something bigger. The first few years were normal, I guess. I worked quite a bit. My job is demanding and sometimes I have to be available at odd hours because we handle security systems for clients in different time zones. Vincent left his job like 6 months after we got married, said he wanted to explore entrepreneurial opportunities, and I was like, well, okay. We have my income, and if he wants to try something of his own, I support it. Except the entrepreneurial opportunities never materialized. He spent a lot of time at home, supposedly working on his laptop, networking, exploring ideas, but basically, I was paying for everything. The rent, utilities, food, absolutely everything, came out of my bank account. And when I mentioned that maybe he could look for something temporary while developing his projects, he'd get defensive and say, I didn't understand how the business world worked, that these things take time. What I didn't know, and I should have seen it coming, honestly, is that Vincent had started seeing someone else. A woman named Nicole who he met I don't know where, probably at one of those coffee shops where he spent his afternoons while I was working. I never suspected anything because, truth is, I trusted him. And besides, I was so busy with my work that I didn't pay much attention to his daily movements. A big mistake on my part. I know. The thing is that as part of my work in cybersecurity, we participate in fraud detection training programs. Basically, we have these dummy accounts, fake credit cards connected to monitoring systems that we use to train our team and test our detection algorithms. One of those cards was linked to my work laptop, which I sometimes brought home when I had to check things or be available outside office hours. The card information was in encrypted files, obviously, but I had access to the data because I needed it for my projects. I never thought someone in my own home would be snooping through my computer. It was like in February of this year, I think. Or maybe late January, when he started planning it. I didn't realize it at the time, but Vincent had been getting into my laptop when I was asleep. Literally at 2 in the morning, when I was sound asleep after 12-hour workdays, this guy would get up and go through my files. I don't know how he managed to access the encrypted information. Maybe he saw me enter some password at some point and memorized it, or maybe he found where I had some work stuff written down. I'm not sure. What I do know is that he copied all the information from that dummy card, number, expiration date, security code, everything. And then, like 2 weeks later, I'm checking a banking app one morning before going to work, just checking my personal accounts like I always do, when I see a strange notification. It wasn't from my regular accounts. It was from the app that monitors the work training accounts. I had like 50 new notifications, and when I open the app, I see transactions everywhere. A hotel in Paris for $15,000. First-class flights for another $12,000. Restaurants, designer stores, more hotels. In total, they added up to like $50,000 in charges that had been authorized over the last 3 days. My first reaction was to think it was a system error or that someone had hacked the training account, but then I saw the transaction details and they were all made in Vincent's name. His full name appeared on the hotel records, on the flight reservations, on everything. And that's when I connected the pieces and realized what had happened. This idiot had stolen my card information. But not just any card. He had stolen a card that is literally designed to detect fraud, that's connected to federal monitoring systems, that sends automatic alerts every time there's suspicious activity. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't. I sat there on my bed with my phone in my hand thinking, is this really happening? Did my husband really steal information from my work to go on vacation? And is he so stupid that he didn't check what type of account he was using? It was like a mixture of absolute betrayal and total amazement at his level of idiocy. Because look, if you're going to commit a crime, at least do it right, you know? But no, Vincent had to choose literally the worst possible card to steal. The first thing I did was call my friend Lauren, who also works at my office, and I told her what was happening. She couldn't believe it either. She kept saying, "Are you sure it's him? Are you sure it's not a mistake?" And I'm like, "His name is on all the transactions. I'm pretty sure." Lauren told me I had to report it, immediately. Not just to the company, but also to the authorities because this was federal fraud. It wasn't a simple credit card dispute. But before doing that, I decided to call a lawyer, Chloe, who had been recommended to me a while back when I was considering making a will. Chloe listened to the whole story and basically told me I had a solid case, that this was identity fraud, theft, and several other things that could get him in serious legal trouble. She asked me if I wanted to proceed with criminal charges or if I preferred to handle it another way, and I honestly, at that moment, was so angry that I said, I want the full weight of the law to fall on him, not just for the money, which wasn't even my real money, but for the betrayal, for the fact that he had been living off my salary for years while planning this, for everything. Chloe told me to document everything, not to confront Vincent yet, to let the authorities do their work. And it turns out I didn't have to wait long, because the next day I got a call from a federal agent, Agent Keller, who was investigating fraudulent activity on the account. The detection systems had immediately flagged it when the charges started, obviously, because that's literally what they're designed to do. Keller asked me a bunch of questions about my access to the account, about who else had access to my laptop, about my relationship with Vincent. I explained the whole situation, and he basically told me they already had enough evidence to proceed with a formal investigation, that Vincent had left a massive digital trail, that he had used the stolen card in his own name without even trying to hide his identity. But here comes the craziest part of this whole story. Vincent was in Paris when all this exploded. He had left without telling me exactly where, just said he had to make a quick business trip, which was already suspicious because the guy hadn't had real business in years. I knew he was in Europe because I had seen some of his social media posts before he quickly deleted them, but I didn't know all the details until I saw the transactions. While I was here processing all this information and talking to lawyers and federal agents, he was at the Paris Ritz with Nicole, dining at Michelin-starred restaurants, buying designer clothes, basically living like a millionaire with money he thought was mine. It took like 5 days until Vincent came back. During that time, I acted normal. Well, as normal as I could, considering I knew my husband was a criminal and that he was probably going to be arrested soon. Keller had asked me not to tell Vincent anything yet because they wanted to see if he mentioned the trip or if he tried to hide something. They wanted to give him the opportunity to confess or to lie more to add to his case. So when Vincent came home, carrying a new suitcase that he probably also bought with the stolen card, I just asked him how his business trip went. And that's where Vincent made his biggest mistake, well, besides stealing the card in the first place. Instead of keeping the business story, he was so excited about his trip that he started telling me all the details. He told me he had been in Paris, that he stayed in incredible hotels, that he ate at the best restaurants, that he bought new clothes because he deserved it. He never mentioned Nicole directly, but I already knew from the investigations that she had been with him the whole time. What shocked me most was his arrogance. Like, this man had just robbed me and was standing there in our living room telling me about his luxury trip as if I should be impressed. While he was talking, I was recording the conversation on my phone. Chloe had suggested that if Vincent confessed something or mentioned the trip, I should document it. So there I was, nodding and saying things like, "Wow, that sounds amazing. How were you able to pay for all that?" And Vincent basically told me he had been saving, that he had some income I didn't know about from freelance projects. Lies upon lies. I asked him specifically about the hotels and restaurants I saw in the transactions, and he described each one in such detail that he was basically incriminating himself without realizing it. After like 20 minutes of this, there was a knock on the door. It was Agent Keller, along with 2 local police officers. Vincent looked at me confused, and I just shrugged. Like, I don't know who they are. I opened the door, and Keller introduced himself, showed his badge, and told Vincent they needed to ask him some questions about fraudulent activity on a credit card account. Vincent's face changed immediately, went from confusion to total panic in a matter of seconds. He tried to say he didn't know what they were talking about, but Keller pulled out documentation with all the transactions, with the hotel records, with everything. They read him his rights right there in my living room. They handcuffed him and took him away to question him at the station. Before leaving, Vincent looked at me and yelled, "This is your fault. You left the information accessible. You set me up." And I just stood there thinking, really? You're going to try to blame me for your own crime? I didn't say anything, just closed the door when they took him away and sat on the couch trying to process everything that had just happened. During the following weeks, everything was legal chaos. Vincent hired a lawyer, obviously, though I don't know how he paid for that considering he had no money. Maybe Nicole helped him, though I doubt she stayed with him after finding out he was arrested for fraud. In his interrogation, Vincent first tried to deny everything, but the evidence was so overwhelming that he eventually had to admit that yes, he had taken the information from my laptop. His lawyer tried to argue that I had been negligent in leaving the information accessible, that Vincent didn't understand it was a training account, that I thought he was using my personal card with my implicit permission because we were spouses, completely ridiculous arguments that went nowhere. Keller kept me informed throughout the process. He explained that Vincent faced charges for identity fraud, theft, and unauthorized use of financial information. The fact that the account was linked to a federal program made the charges more serious. They offered him a plea deal. If he accepted the charges and paid full restitution, plus community service, he would avoid prison time. Vincent eventually accepted because his lawyer probably told him that if he went to trial, they were going to destroy him with all the evidence they had against him. The restitution was interesting because the account was dummy, so there was no real financial victim, but he still had to pay the $50,000 to my company's training program as part of his sentence. He also had to do like 300 hours of community service and ended up with a criminal record, which basically ruined any chance of getting a decent job in the future. I didn't feel sorry for him. Honestly, actions have consequences. You know what I mean? While all this was happening legally, I initiated divorce proceedings. Chloe handled that side of things too, and it was relatively straightforward considering Vincent was literally facing criminal charges. There was no dispute over assets because everything was mine anyway. He never contributed financially to our marriage. We had no children, thank God, because that would have complicated everything. The divorce papers were finalized like 6 months after his arrest, and honestly, it was a huge relief to sign it and know that legally I was no longer tied to him. The thing with Nicole is that apparently she left him immediately after finding out what happened. Keller told me she cooperated with the investigation, said that Vincent had told her the trip was a gift from me, that I was okay with him taking a vacation because he worked so hard on his entrepreneurial projects. Obviously, she didn't know anything about the fraud, or at least that's what she said, and I don't blame her for believing him because Vincent was convincing when he wanted to be. After he was arrested, she changed her number and blocked Vincent from all her social media. I heard through the grapevine that she was also married and that all this blew up her own life too. But honestly, I'm not very interested in her story. I had enough managing my own. What bothered me most about this whole situation, more than the fraud itself, was realizing how much time I had wasted with someone who clearly didn't respect me. Vincent lived off my salary for years, never really contributed to our household. And when he finally decided to do something for himself, it was to rob me and cheat on me. It's like, at what point in our relationship did he think this was acceptable? When exactly did he stop caring enough to not only have an affair, but also commit a federal crime using my work information? Those are the questions that kept me up many nights after everything. My colleagues at work were incredible during this whole process. Obviously, they had to be involved because the compromised account was part of our systems, but nobody blamed me for what happened. My boss even said this was a good case study for updating our security protocols, that we were going to use my experience to train the team on information protection even in home environments. It was weird turning my personal nightmare into a professional lesson, but I guess something good had to come out of all this. Lauren was with me every step of the way, going to hearings when she could, bringing me food when I was so stressed I didn't want to cook, just being an incredible friend. She told me several times that she always thought Vincent was kind of suspicious, that she never understood what I saw in him, but that she didn't want to say anything because I thought I was happy. I appreciate that she was honest with me about that, although I would have preferred she told me before. but I understand it's complicated to tell someone you don't like their partner. It took like 9 months from the arrest until everything was completely resolved. Now Vincent is doing his community service somewhere, probably cleaning parks or something. And I honestly don't know and don't care exactly what he's doing. I blocked his number after the divorce, blocked him on all social media, basically erased his existence from my life as much as I could. Every now and then I hear things from mutual acquaintances, like that he's living with his parents now because he can't get a job with his record. But those updates don't give me satisfaction or sadness. They're just information that goes in one ear and out the other. What I do know is that I'm much better off without him. My apartment feels more peaceful now that it's just me. I don't have to worry about whether someone is snooping through my laptop while I sleep or spending money we don't have. My bank account is just mine, and I can spend it however I want without having to justify why I'm not financing someone else's non-existent entrepreneurial dreams. I've even started dating again. Nothing serious yet because honestly, I need time to process everything that happened and work on my own trust issues. But it's nice to have that option without feeling like I'm betraying someone. The biggest irony of this whole situation is that Vincent literally self-destructed through his own arrogance and stupidity. If he had used any other card, maybe my actual personal card, or had found another way to finance his affair, I probably never would have found out until much later, if at all. But no, he had to choose the only card in my possession that was connected to federal fraud detection systems. It's almost poetic, in a way. The universe literally put the worst possible option in front of him, and he took it without thinking twice. Sometimes I wonder if Vincent really thought he'd get away with it, if he genuinely believed he could steal $50,000, go on a luxury vacation with another woman, and that I would never find out. What was his long-term plan? Did he think I simply wouldn't check my accounts? Or maybe he thought he could convince me it was all legitimate somehow? It doesn't make sense when I think about it logically. But I guess people who commit crimes aren't always thinking logically. Last week, I was organizing some things in my closet and found a photo of us from our wedding day. We looked so happy in that photo, so full of hope about the future. I stared at it for a moment, trying to remember how I felt that day. If there was any warning sign, I ignored. But honestly, I don't think there was. Vincent was good at hiding who he really was. Or maybe I was naive and didn't want to see the signs. Probably a bit of both. I threw the photo in the trash because there's no point holding on to memories of something that clearly never was what I thought it was. Now I'm focused on rebuilding my life exactly how I want it to be. I've been working on a big project at the office that has me professionally excited. I've been going to the gym more often. I've been spending more time with friends I neglected during my marriage. It's liberating not having to worry about anyone but myself. And yes, there are still days where I feel angry about everything that happened, where I think about the time I lost and the stress I had to manage because of Vincent's selfish decisions. But those days are becoming less and less frequent, and the good days outweigh the bad by far. The most satisfying thing about all this was seeing how the truth came out so quickly and completely. Vincent didn't have a chance to twist the story or play the victim because the evidence was so clear there was no way to deny it. It's good to have that kind of closure, to have absolute proof that I wasn't crazy, that my suspicions were valid, that I did the right thing by reporting it instead of sweeping it under the rug. Some people asked me if I felt bad about having my husband arrested, and my answer was always the same. He got himself arrested. I just reported a crime. I have no regrets about that. If anything good came out of this nightmarish experience, it's that I now trust my instincts much more. For years with Vincent, every time something felt weird or off, I rationalized it or ignored it because I didn't want to create conflict or because I thought I was being paranoid. Now I know better. If something feels wrong, it probably is, and it's okay to investigate and ask difficult questions instead of just accepting what you're told. I also learned to value my independence in a way I didn't before. I'm completely capable of supporting myself, of handling my own problems, of building a life that satisfies me without needing someone else to validate it or complete it. I guess at the end of the day, Vincent did me a favor in a twisted and terrible way. He forced me to end a relationship I probably should have ended years earlier. He showed me exactly who he really was, and he gave me the opportunity to start over without him. It wasn't the way I would have chosen for things to end. Obviously, I would have preferred not to go through months of legal and emotional stress. But given that I did go through it, at least I came out the other side stronger and wiser. And honestly, that's enough for now.